Good day, everyone. Have you ever wondered what transformative learning means and how this can be applied in action research? This explainer video aims to provide an overview of this learning theory developed by Jack Mezirow.
This table of contents is to give you, our viewers, an idea of what to expect in this short explainer video.
We start with this quote from Alvin Toffler, an American writer, futurist, and businessperson known for his works discussing modern technologies. He said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Before proceeding to transformative learning, let's start with a definition of learning theories. They are an organized set of principles explaining how individuals acquire, retain, and recall knowledge. By studying and knowing the different learning theories, we can better understand how learning occurs. The learning theory can be categorized into three. First, behaviorism. Behaviorism is where new behaviors are acquired through associations between stimuli and responses. Next, cognitivism. Cognitivism is where information processing leads to understanding and retention. And finally, constructivism. Constructivism is where we construct our own knowledge of the world based on individual experiences. Mezirow's theory of reflective practice comes from the school of thought of constructivism, the belief that the way you see the world affects the world.
We started with a quote earlier to introduce the transformative learning theory of Jack Mezirow, who is a consultant in adult literacy and community development. Mezirow began working on the transformative learning theory in 1978 while studying adult women who chose to re-enter higher education. Mezirow defined transformational learning as the process by which we transform our taken-for-granted perspectives, habits of mind, and mindsets to make them more inclusive, discriminating, open, emotionally capable of change, and reflective, so that they may generate beliefs and opinions that will prove more true or justified to guide action.
This section focuses on the differences between reflective and non-reflective actions. Reflective action refers to thoughtful action with reflection, which leads to ex post facto reflection. Ex post facto reflection refers to looking back on prior learning and focuses on assumptions about the content of the problem, process followed in the problem solving, or basis from which the problem was posed. Reflection on presuppositions is what we mean by critical reflection. Meanwhile, non-reflective action simply means thoughtful action without reflection.
The next 4 slides will cover the principles of the transformative learning theory. According to Mezirow, the principles can be used as guidelines to help select instructional tools. So the first principle says adults exhibit 2 kinds of learning. First is instrumental, where individuals are tasked with identifying the cause or effect of certain events or situations. And communicative, where individuals gain communicative skills and learn how to express their wishes, feelings, and emotions.
The second principle is learning in transformative theory involves a change in meaning structures, that is, schemes and perspectives. Mezirow had said, meaning perspectives and meaning schemes are 2 major elements of meaning structures which set the state for our expectations. A meaning structure is basically the concepts, beliefs, judgments, and feelings that shape our interpretation of information. Students are able to understand their meaning structure through self-reflection, self-directed learning, and critical theory.
The third principle is reflection about content, processes or premises results to change in meaning structures. Mesereau identified three forms of reflection: content, process, and premise. These are useful categories. Briefly, content reflection is where you think about the issues, what you think is happening. Meanwhile, process reflection is where you think about strategies and procedures and how things are being done. Finally, premise reflection is inquiry into the unstated and often non-conscious underlying assumptions which govern attitudes and behavior. Figure 1 presents how content, process, and premise reflections are applied to the action research cycle as a meta cycle of inquiry. The processes included in the action research cycle are critical foci for inquiry.
The last principle in the transformative learning theory is this: learning can involve refining or elaborating our meaning schemes, learning new meaning schemes, transforming meaning schemes, and transforming meaning perspectives.
We now move to distortions in meaning perspective. There are three areas of common distortion in meaning perspective: epistemic, sociocultural, and psychic distortions acquired through the process of introjection, which is the uncritical acceptance of another's values. An example of epistemic distortion is using what psychologists describe as life stages as standards for judging a particular development. And an example of sociocultural distortion is if we believe that members of a subgroup are lazy, unintelligent, and unreliable and treat them accordingly, they may become that way because we created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Lastly, an example of psychic distortions are the traumatic events in childhood which results in a lost function, such as the ability to confront, to feel sexual, or take risks that must be regained if one is to become a fully functioning adult. It is desirable for learners to understand how ideology in the wider sense affects distorted epistemic and psychic beliefs for purposes of making educational interventions.
Our next discussion is on the main components of transformative learning. According to Mesereau, the main components of transformative learning are experience, critical reflection, reflective discourse, and action. Experience begins in childhood and involves social and cultural aspects. Meanwhile, critical reflection occurs through personal reflection or group discussions. This often involves questioning assumptions and beliefs on past experiences. Reflection discourse is when people involved may make a shift and alter their way of thinking or doing. This may include personal or social transformation. And finally, action is when a person may take immediate action, delayed action, or reasoned reaffirmation of an existing pattern of action.
There are 10 phases or stages in transformational learning. The process starts with disorienting dilemma. This means a person's current meaning structure does not match a previous experience. This is followed by self-examination with feelings of guilt or shame. Next is a critical assessment of epistemic, sociocultural, or psychic assumptions. This is followed by a recognition that others have shared similar transformation. Next is exploration of new roles or actions. Then, development of a plan for action. Followed by acquisition of knowledge and skills for implementing one's plans. Because of this, they try out the new roles. Next, they develop competence and self-confidence in new roles and relationships, which lead to reintegration into one's life on the basis of conditions dictated by one's perspective. Through transformational learning, individuals gain new knowledge and skills.
Some activities can inspire transformative learning in an organization. In this slide, we're going to share with you several examples, some of which you may be able to relate to. The first example is job shadowing. Job shadowing refers to gaining knowledge of the responsibilities involved in obtaining practical experience of the role of a senior member who is in a position that an individual desires to be in. Another example is scenario-based learning. This is when employees develop skills and abilities in a safe environment carried out by a senior member in the company. Yet another example is cultural adaptation in the workplace. This exposes employees to different cultural experiences that can facilitate the expansion of their worldview. A fourth example is co-working with different departments. This can greatly help to improve an employee's knowledge, understanding, and ability to work differently. And lastly, a change in career. A change in career can have a radical effect on an individual and alter their perspective. This is because an individual will gain a broader experience from a completely new environment which she or he can then compare to previous experiences. And there you have it. Is there anything among the examples that you can relate to?
As an educator, it is important to help students learn using different kinds of learning strategies. There are many ways that educators can introduce this kind of learning. In this slide, we're going to share with you some examples. The first one is to give students chances to learn about new perspectives. Teachers can provide an action or disorienting dilemma inside their classroom. For example, students can learn about different political parties by actually meeting political candidates. The next example is to help students identify and question their assumptions. Teachers can model this behavior by sharing stories of how their own understanding and perspectives have shifted or how they analyze their own beliefs. Yet another example is to create opportunities for critical discourse. Teachers can help students create pro and con lists of literature or articles, or give students opportunities for debate, or require students to prepare both sides of a debate. Finally, educators can provide transformative learning examples, such as when teachers introduce literature and articles that discuss different religions, helping students gain new perspectives and understanding.
Before we end, we would like to present some of the pros and cons of transformative learning. This is to help organizations, individuals, and educators decide for themselves if transformative learning will help them with their need for change.
Let's start with the pros. The transformative learning model is ideal when a person is motivated for self-directed learning. Also, it can fundamentally change one's perspective of the world, making her or him more accepting and inclusive.
And now let's move to the cons. The transformative learning model requires a lot of effort. It is suitable if one is motivated and has the time to integrate the learnings into one's behavior. It is also a very long-term model and not suitable for short-term learning. And lastly, the transformative learning model focuses too much on rational and not much on emotional aspects. We have finally come to the end of our presentation. We hope this explainer video helped you have a better understanding of Jack Mesereau's transformative learning. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.